the idea of today is to give you an overview, so I'll just share my screen.
We can see that, Neil, thank you.
Okay, all good. Right. So we're just going to go into the scheduler, into the production scheduling area. There's a few different sort of areas that we can go into, but I can talk through what we need to from this one area. So we're just going to open the production planning area and start off by sort of understanding what sort of data that we need to actually do the planning and in the scheduler. So in the top half of the screen here, what you can see is all of the works order information. So it's what we call the header. So you've got an identifier, like a unique identifier for that particular job. It might be a works order number, job number, batch number. Lots of people call it lots of different things. It's just a unique number to identify it. You might have a drawing, article number, part number, all three that we can display as to what we're making, and obviously a description of the part, the quantity that we require, and you would probably have got a required date from your customer when they place the order. So that would be this required date field. You then have the customer and who it is that you're manufacturing the item for. So as a header, that's the sort of minimum that we need, but we can add other things like the value of the orders and things like this if we want to. In the bottom part of the screen here are the operations that make up the part that we've selected. So in this case, this connector is made up of 5 operations. And then you'll have the resource that you're going to manufacture it on. So that could be an individual specific machine or a person or a resource that we're going to do this job on, or it could be a group. So you might have several machines all the same, and you can do it on any one of them. So we could call that into a group on the operation. Within each operation, you would have a setting time if it needs to be set up in any way, and a cycle time each for the parts. So that again and also the description of the operation if you want to bring that in. So that again is the sort of minimum data that we want, but we can bring in other things again as well, and that could be talked about at the time as to what you need to be displayed there. The way that we get the data in, there's 2 ways really of actually putting this data into the scheduler's database, and that is you either use the scheduler standalone, and you can create what we call master routings, master records, if you like, sample parts, we call them. And you can actually create the routings for that particular part number, and then you can create a works order from it. But in the majority of cases, in probably 99% of the cases where we sold the scheduler, there'll be an ERP system or a third-party system probably already involved that might hold this information, and in which case we can pull data from that system and then import it into the scheduler, so we can automate the information going in. So things like the works order header that we've just spoken about and the operations, if they're all in an ERP or an MRP type system, we can link into views that are within that database, or if that's not possible, an outputted file. So what you can see here is down on the left-hand side, we've got the status of our jobs. So we can see in yellow the work in progress. So have we booked on any operations of these jobs? And red, not started. So we use quite a visual method of being able to understand certain aspects of what's going on in the schedule. And then over here in this deviation column, we also have whether the job's actually on time or potentially late. So in this column, we have 5 colors: red, amber, yellow, light green, and dark green. And we can set, or you can set, the tolerance that you want in each of those different color bands. The system you can see on the screen at the moment, the red is 7 or more days late, amber is up to 7 days late. The yellow one here is finishing dead on time when we should be delivering it. And then we've got a light green, which is up to 14 days early, and a dark green, which is more than that. And the great thing about the sort of visual display is as we go down, we can spot any problem jobs further down in the future. So how do we then plan it? So for instance, here, the connector, we wanted it on the 28th of the 1st. It's actually planned to finish on the 3rd of the 2nd, so it's showing up as 6 days late. In the bottom part of the screen here, you'll see a similar column called delay to previous. And that's how long it takes to change over between operations. So in this case, this job here, the first operation is done, and then the second operation takes 9 days and 20 hours to get onto the resource or the machine. So it can also help you to highlight up where there may be bottlenecks that you might want to address and have a look at. So if we double click on this job, we can jump to one of our 2 graphical views. My one jumps to what we call the planning board view, which is this one here. And we also have a timeline view, which is more of a Gantt type view. You can use either. We can jump you to either when you double click. So it's just a configuration in the system. So what you can see here are different colors of the different jobs that we've got scheduled. There are other different color schemes that we can show you in a full demonstration that can help you to highlight late jobs and things like this. But the one we're interested in is this one that's white with the black border. And if we blind it out, we can follow it through. So down on the left are my resources that I'm planning to. So I might have a number of resources there on the left-hand side. Across the top is my timescale. So in this particular view, each block is a day, and it starts at the bottom, works up, starts at the bottom, works up. So that's what it does in the planning board view. So if we look in this square above the resources and we hang on an operation of a job, it tells us what the works order and op number is. So here's op 10 of that job. Op 20 is on the same resource. Op 30 goes onto the Fadel. Op 40 is some subcontract, so we tell it how long we expect to lose it from the company for, and in this case it's 3 days. And then it comes back in for some final inspection. So it's a fairly simple job to follow through. If we bring the other jobs in, you can see those all around it. So we can do a number of things here to try to address the problem that job was late. I can pick up this operation and I can see here light grey and dark grey. So light grey is out of shift. We can set a finite capacity against every resource. It could be the same on all of them. It could be different on all of them. And the darker grey areas here are available capacity on that resource. So you can sort of see whether or not I can fit this job in to somewhere that's got some capacity. But I'm going to drop this right at the front to show you what happens. So within the system, we have some rules to keep everything in the correct order. So normally the standard sort of default rule is no overlaps. So you'll see that each operation has to follow the other. So where I dropped op 50 at the front, it says you can't do that there because I've got to have done op 40, 30, 20 and 10. In the system, we can overlap jobs by a percentage or a quantity of the previous operation, and we can split operations and run them in parallel across more than one resource at the same time if you want. But what we tend to say is, let's let the production planner make that decision. So what we've done here, by forcing this job in, we've moved these jobs backwards. So we've got some capacity available in front. So we'd use this little feature called fill holes, which will actually bring jobs back into those gaps and try to fill them up and utilize that capacity, but it will also adhere to the rules of keeping everything in the correct sequence. Sometimes you might find a really small gap or maybe slightly larger that the system can't put the job in automatically because there's not a job small enough to go in there, and you might just decide to move something in sort of manually yourself. But we try to keep all of the admin down to a minimum so that the system's doing most of the work for you. The other way that we can plan is we can use the automated algorithms. So here we can see different methods of planning that we can use. I won't go through and describe them all, but a lot of people obviously would use like a delivery method of the due date. And we can also have a fixed period at the front here. So we can use this slider to fix a period of time. And so that any job that touches that period of time stays where it is, and you can reschedule everything else outside of that. And the ARD, automatic resource distribution, is to put something that's in a group that we spoke about, whether you got similar machines or the same machines, and put it to one of the resources that are in that group. So if I save this, it would go away and it will reschedule everything outside of that 7-day window. So that's great. We've made some changes. We've done this job as fast as we can without overlapping. But what we really want to know now is we want to understand the consequence of those changes before we actually save this as a schedule, because by the time I save it, if I drive that down to the shop floor, then it's too late. So here in the production order list again, you can see we've got a column called impact, and you'll see some coloured arrows in there. So the green arrow means we've improved the end date of that job by this number of days. So my connector that was 6 days late, I've improved it 6 days and I'm now finishing it dead on time. The red arrow means that we've moved this job outwards. So the valve spindle here, for instance, was 1 day late, but I've now made it 11 days late. So as I go down, we see that we've affected a lot of jobs. And at the top here, I can view the jobs by order and say, right, show me all the jobs I've improved and show me the ones that I've moved out. So all of the ones that are still green, I'm still on time with. So even though they've moved out, I'll probably be happy with that and okay. It'll be the ones that have gone red that I'll be concerned about. And I might then look at when they're actually due. So this one here, for instance, is due in January. This one's not due till April. So I can start to sort of, evaluate what's coming up really. So we have a choice now. We can either save this and call it our live schedule, and we can save it and work to that. Or if I don't like it, I can click load and take it back to its last saved state. Or I have another option, which is to create what we call a snapshot. So I can create a snapshot of that particular schedule and then go and do something else and create another one, for instance. And then I can look at these different snapshots. And here I can see how many works orders are in each of my tolerance bands. So I can get a very, very sort of quick heads up as to which one of those snapshots might be the best one to use. I can then look at that snapshot if I want to and load it in a new window. So I can look at the current window and the snapshot window, decide which one it is that I might want to save, load it, and then save it as my schedule. So I have the ability to do these multiple what if scenarios and select the one that I want to use. So if I was to save this, the next thing that I would do, I'm just going to hold off saving it for a second, but just explain that the next thing you're going to want to do is to actually drive that information down to the shop floor. We need to tell them what it is that they're going to be doing. So the way that we can do that, there's 2 ways. There's the old-fashioned way, if you like, of being able to print out a work to list. So we could print out a work list for all or one of those resources if I selected one individually. And then you can take it down onto the shop floor and you can go around and you can leave it with all of the different resources. The trouble with that is that things constantly tend to change in a manufacturing environment. So you'll be forever going around and printing out work lists or running around telling people what to do. So the more modern method is to create a digital work queue down on the shop floor. So if I just take you to our shop floor screen, this could be, this is air WIP booking, and this could be what's used on the shop floor to inform people what they are doing and also to be able to update the scheduler. So what you can see here is I've selected the Mazak. I can select any machine that I'm allowed to here and get a work list for it. This is part of our monitoring, so just ignore that part of it for now. And then I've got a list of jobs, and the connector that I've just moved to the front is these 2 operations here, which are quite a way down. If I then go and I save the schedule again, and I commit that and say this is the schedule I want to use, then it writes it back to the scheduler database. And what it's also doing is it's going around and it's updating all of the work queues on the shop floor. So it's synchronizing those with the scheduler. So what happens is that it now will change and show you that I've moved that connector to the front. So if you keep the front end of the schedule up to date, and there it's just happened, if you keep the front end of the schedule up to date, then down on the shop floor, they know exactly what's coming up. And I could go into a lot of detail about what's here in the work queue area as well, in the WIP booking, because it does a lot of good things and nice features, but that would be saved for a proper demonstration if you wanted it. But one thing we should touch on is the fact that we can access the digital route card. So if we look here, we've got the 5 operations that we plan to do on that particular resource for that connector. We can see red here because none of those operations are yet started. We can see how long it should take to set and how long it should take in total to run it. So there's information here about what I'm manufacturing as on a digital card as well. So all the operator has to do is say, I want to start this job, and it will go into the active operations area and highlight it yellow. And then back on the scheduler, because I'm in the planning area, I need to just refresh it because we sell this to people with like a low number of resources, maybe 10 or so, up to people with 100+ resources. So if you're one of those bigger systems, if people are booking on and off constantly whilst you're in the scheduling area, the last thing you want is everything keeps moving around you. So in this case, we can just click load and we can refresh it. But if you come in from the main menu, it will always pick up the latest data. So you can now see that this operation has now turned yellow because it's now in work. If I jump to it on the planning board again, we can now see a little no entry sign, and I can't now move this operation because it's now running on the shop floor. So it will take precedence over anything. If I try to drop something in front of it, it will go behind it. What will now happen to this operation? So it's running throughout the morning here. For the afternoon, sorry, and then up until where this little split is and the no entry sign disappears, that's that operation end. So it will start to reduce in time. So it will get smaller and smaller in real time. And then when it gets to a small bit at the end, about 10 minutes, just so you can get your mouse on it, it will stop reducing and it will start pushing backwards. So it will start to push these operations backwards. And then you might get subsequent operations on other resources also being affected by the fact that you haven't finished that job on the shop floor. So you get this real-time ripple effect going through the whole system. Something else I can do here is if maybe a resource broke down or couldn't run it because an operator phoned in sick, I can on the fly make changes to the time. So I can just decrease or remove that shift availability. And I can even go back here and I could increase it. So I can do these other what if scenarios based around what if I change my shift, can I do more hours on this in order to get jobs out on time, etc. So the WIP booking keeps the scheduler updated. If I go back to it, we can finish a job. I can pause a job. If I'm going home that night and coming in again in the morning, I would restart it. I can finish the job. I can book good and non-conforming quantity as I go along. So if I now finish this job, I can say how many I've done. So I can tick it up here or put a number in if it's a large quantity. So I've got 7. I can book a non-conforming part and you can have non-conforming reasons. And I can then finish that operation. It then disappears from the work queue. And then back on the scheduler, this is the operation I've just finished. So if I now do that refresh again, you'll see that it now throws it off and says you've completed that operation. So it's no longer in the schedule. And where it can, other operations would pull forward. So because there's a lot of op 10s and 20s on this particular resource, they've all moved forward. But you can see I've created a gap here because this operation's op 30 and it's waiting for an operation somewhere else is the likely scenario there. So I can just run my fill holes and I can look and see if there's any jobs that I can use that capacity for and optimize my capacity. We can also get things, important information like capacity and utilization figures. So here I could say, right, show me maybe my next 6 months of capacity, and the green mountains getting bigger show me my capacity increasing. I then have this red rectangle that I can move to a start date. I can pick a selectable period, or I can move it at the end or use my mouse wheel. And you'll see what's happening below is it's recalculating everything inside that rectangle. So I've then got my resource, my percentage utilization and a graphical view of that. Again, very visual. We can put 3 colors on this. My one says above 90% is red because I'm getting towards a bottleneck scenario. I can order this by least to most utilized. I can see my hours that I've made available for the next 60 days, how much is actually being used, what the free capacity is and what the biggest gap is in that period of time and when it starts. In the bottom part of the screen, the green highlight is the week in which the biggest gap starts, and the numbers in the boxes depend on the view mode. At the moment, it's showing my used capacity. I can show my assigned capacity, which is my shift pattern, or I can see how many hours are free each week on each resource here as well. A nice feature that we did also add in is in our Air Analytics. So here we've got a tab called Workload. And this is basically a workload view that's saved when you save the scheduler, and then you can see the timeline as to where you are. So this is the current timeline that will move along the screen as the time progresses. And these are the different jobs that are being worked on or are on the scheduler currently. So you can see the status and whether they're work in progress, paused, not started, and you can see the timeline. So for instance, this one's paused, but we're now sort of halfway through it. So we know that in this instance, we're actually behind because we should have started this job, but we haven't. Some of these others are work in progress, and we can see where we stand and where we are. So for instance, this one here on the HAS, we should have finished because we've now started moving into this job. But we can see if you were monitoring or you went down to check it, I can see that this is in an inspection state. So it's been waiting for first off inspection, for instance. So that can give you a really good insight into where you are, as well as using the scheduler in conjunction with that, and how it all sort of comes together to understand where those parts are and whether you're on time with them. And the final thing just to touch on before I finish this sort of brief overview is how we deal with assemblies or kits of parts. So the butterfly valve assembly here, if I open up the parts that are in it, so I can see that my main butterfly valve assembly that I'm going to deliver to the customer is 9 days late. And these are the parts that make it up. So for instance, here, these two parts make this sub-assembly. This sub-assembly goes into this one, that goes into the main assembly. So we've got an indented parts BOM as well. And that will take that into account when scheduling. So if I pick my butterfly valve and I go to this one called net plan, I can blind out all the other parts again, and we can see all of the different parts and their operations. And the last thing we do is we assemble it and we inspect it. So if I was to move this operation, I'll do it a little bit blind, but if I move this forward, you can see that it's actually changed the other parts and everything to keep it all in the correct sequence. And back on my production order list, I can see exactly what I've affected on that particular assembly. So I've actually improved it by 10 days, and I'm now 1 day early, and I've made also improvements here. So even though some of the parts are late, they're still okay on time to actually put into the build and get it out to my customer. But again, obviously you would have an effect on other jobs if you've done something like that, which you can then see. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an insight. I've run over by a couple of minutes of my allotted time, but hopefully it gives you a good insight as to some of the functionality of the scheduler. And like I said, if you're interested in understanding it further, then we can arrange a full demonstration for you and show you all of the benefits and go into this in a little bit more detail.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neil. Thank you for that. Thanks very much. If you want to pop yourself back on camera, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. We also have Wayne Lawrence here with us today. Wayne is an area sales manager as well, so some of you may have met Wayne previously, so just letting you know that's who's here with us today. So there were some questions through that, Neil, while you were talking, so I said I'd capture them at the end. So the first ones that came in, I think they're all kind of related actually. Can you do length-based scheduling? And can you schedule multiple different lengths of the same items in one plan?
So length-based scheduling, I'm assuming we're talking like, you know, cutting materials for certain meterage and things like this. So provided you've got that as an integer, we can't deal with decimal parts like a 1.5 meters. You'd have to round it up to maybe 2, and you know how long each meter takes, for instance, then yes, there's no reason why you can't plan it that way. But for each operation, it has to be an integer part number.
Okay, Chris, I think that was from Chris actually. So hopefully that answered your question, Chris. Anybody, if they want to unlock their microphone, by the way, you're very welcome. It can be a dialogue. You don't just have to use the chat now. Part of Chris's question as well is, can you group orders that have shared subcomponents? I'm guessing you covered this a bit in the assembly there, and running these concurrent up to a certain operation. So I think that hopefully we covered that a little bit in this assembly conversation.
There are other ways as well, but I think we would need to get into that in more detail in a demonstration.
Absolutely. Okay. Is the planning of orders taking material availability into account, i.e. I want to move an order forward, however the raw materials are not available yet?
Yep. So if your ERP system or your planner knows when that material is due in, then it can be brought in as an earliest start date on the first operation of that job. So that will inhibit you getting that job ahead of that date. So you can't automatically schedule it ahead. It won't allow you to drag and drop it ahead of the date that the material is actually due to you.
Just to reiterate, because it has come up in the question as well, this demo has been recorded, so I will send that out to you, link to it, probably within the next 24 hours. It won't be maybe today, but definitely tomorrow. I have this is from Maria. I have a 7-day operation to process 5 production runs weekly. There are 2 areas involved, working separately or in parallel at times using the same operators. I need visibility for 7 days where I can superimpose one area over the other, showing where the bottlenecks are. If some of these are too detailed, we can cover those if you do have an idea now.
Again, there's things, yeah. So the capacity and utilization we showed, we can narrow that right down to 1 day, but obviously you will be able to see things here on the planning board. But yeah, there's things that we can look at doing that can help you to view that. Again, I think it's something to understand more in detail, and then have a look at how we can display that for you and show you and highlight that up.
Great. Thank you. Hope that helps, Maria. Is the percentage efficiency set either on the machine resource or calendar? That's from Luke.
So we set it against the machine. So here on the machine there, we've got a work speed factor, and 0.6 is 60% efficient. So you can have a different efficiency on each resource, because obviously it's really rare to actually build in inefficiencies into your times. Most companies don't do that, so nothing runs at 100%. So you build it into each resource that would take into account how efficient it is. And if it's a machine shop, then our machine monitoring module can also help you understand exactly how productive you are on each resource.
Fantastic. We are coming to the end of the half an hour. We're happy to hang on for a bit if anybody has got any questions though. So, there's no pressure to get off this call if you do have any more questions. Whilst you're all still there, I'm just going to launch a couple of polls just to get any feedback from you. If there's any feedback that you're happy to provide us, you should see that come up on your screen now. Again, it's just some free-form questions asking about your current planning challenges and what features that you've seen today are most of use to you. Yes, so again, if there are any more questions, please shout them out. Again, whilst we have Neil, it's a good opportunity to ask him any questions. If not, then we can leave it there for today. So thank you everybody very much for your time today. I hope you found it useful. As we started out at the beginning, this was meant to be a quick overview so you can see the system, get a rough idea of some of the core features and how it works. But after this session, when I send everything out, I will ask if there's some follow-up actions. If you want us to arrange a full demo with you, we can do that. That's not a problem. Got some new messages that's changed. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. Yeah, so at that point then we will wish you a good rest of your day, and we'll be in touch again soon.
Many thanks.
Thanks, Neil.